Hey there, welcome back to the Nourished CEO Podcast. I'm your host, Laura Schoenfeld, and today we have our first guest of the newly rebranded show, my friend, Kelly Ruta. So Kelly is somebody who I met locally through a monthly business dinner that we both have kind of come in and out of for various reasons. I had a baby and Kelly actually lives kind of far, so it can be a little tough for her to attend. But every time Kelly's at these dinners, I always love chatting with her. She's got so much in common with me, both being from New Jersey and us playing volleyball when we were younger. And she's got a lot of similar personality traits as mine. So I was so pumped that she very generously agreed to come on the show to chat with us about the sabbatical that she's about to go on. And she did tell me that this is the last interview she's doing before her sabbatical. So I feel very honored to be that person who she's doing the interview with. And everything we talked about on this episode is so relevant to the overall theme of this show. So my hope is that whether you yourself want to take a sabbatical or take time off from your business for whatever reason, maybe it's like a maternity leave like I did, that this episode will empower you to do that. But also, if you're the kind of person who wants to avoid needing a sabbatical because you can't necessarily take care of yourself anymore in the business that you've built, then this episode is actually going to be very powerful for you as well. So I had so much fun chatting with Kelly about just the stuff that we both are seeing in the industry and how we both feel about business ownership for women. And it was really inspiring to hear her raw and honest story about how she came to the decision to take a sabbatical and how she plans to move forward when it is wrapping up. So without further ado, here is Kelly Ruta. All right. Well, I am so excited to have my first official guest for our newly rebranded podcast. We're not editing out the mistakes on this one. Kelly Ruta, thanks for joining me, Kelly.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I'm excited for you, and I can't wait to dive into this conversation.
Yeah. So it's funny. I feel like the couple of episodes that I did before this are all about growing your business and adapting to AI and all this stuff that's happening in the online space. And now we're going to talk about taking a break. So I know that you had announced recently on your Instagram that you are going to be taking a sabbatical from your business. So I would just love to hear, where did that seed get planted? I imagine that wasn't a short-term, like immediate decision. I'm sure you took a lot of time to think and plan and contemplate if that was what you were going to do. But walk me through, how did that become something you were even considering? And then what was the decision-making experience like for actually saying, yes, I'm doing this?
You know, I wish I could tell you that it was some great story. Like I just had this inspired download that I needed to take time and it was not like that at all. I just want to keep it very real. So long story short, I got the original, sort of the OG COVID infection in 2020 and got extremely ill and really never fully healed. So I was eventually diagnosed with long COVID. I live in North Carolina, and I had the very fortunate opportunity to work with the long COVID clinic out of UNC Chapel Hill. And so I have a whole team of doctors helping me try to navigate a very, very difficult life change. You know, I'm about 30 years into my career, and I certainly was not anticipating something like this happening. I'm a very high energy person. I love my work. I love to work. And this has had a profoundly negative effect on my ability to do actually most of the things I love. So sports, traveling, working, anything physical. And so I am, you know this already about me, I have a very strong personality. I haven't had an easy life. And so the way my personality has developed is I have a deep well of resilience and lots of strength, and I don't tend to back down from fights. That has not been great for the last, I want to say, about 2 to 2.5 years. So for the first 2.5 years that I was sick, that served me very, very well, because I was told over and over, there's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do. And I was not taking that for an answer. We're going to figure out something because I am not staying this sick. I was able to start a bunch of medications off label, started to feel somewhat better, got back to work, and had to kind of start from the beginning, Laura. Honestly, I had a really successful coaching business, keynote speaking, and I basically was starting over from step one. And I went in running, I mean, sprinting, and never stopped. And I ignored a lot of things that were going on for me physically and really just kept plodding along like a lot of us do. I mean, when you're a business owner, you're a business owner because you're a go-getter. And, you might get knocked down, but most of us get up pretty quickly and just get back to work. But in doing that, I ignored a lot of red flags. And in this past year or so, some new physical things have come up, and it's kind of one after the next. And my team of doctors has been asking me for a year now to close my business down completely and just stop working altogether. To which I said, next question, please. Thank you. And then they said, would you please take a sabbatical? And I also said no. Then more things came up this year. I started to notice that not only was my business doing very poorly, which I want to freely admit here, because I know a lot of people right now, for various reasons, are having trouble in business. And I don't want people to feel ashamed to admit that sometimes it just doesn't go well, right? Mm-hmm. So my business wasn't doing well. I seemed like I was getting sicker. And I finally said something's got to give. And this was not a fun choice. This was not an easy choice. I went into this kicking and screaming and did not want to slow down, did not want to take a break. One of my defense mechanisms in life is I can handle anything, but usually that turns into, and then I do it all myself. Mm. So slowing down felt like giving up. It felt like starting over again. It felt like an admission of weakness when really all it is an admission of vulnerability, and they're not the same things. Mm-hmm. So I had a lot of resistance. And also I feel a deep sense of responsibility to my family and contributing to the financial well-being of my family, and not expecting that all of that comes from my husband. We never wanted it to be that way. Mm-hmm. So that's a very long-winded way of coming to the point of making the decision. Every single person in my inner circle was begging me to do it. And finally, I had a doctor's appointment where my doctor said to me, I'm very, very concerned about this particular symptom. I'm going to put you in for an emergency exam. And I was like, that's it. That's it. Whatever comes from this, test, I'll deal with it. But that is the straw that broke the camel's back for me, is I went in for just a regular routine checkup and I left with, you're having an emergency test done. Mm-hmm. And that kind of made the decision for me. And then for the last, I don't know, maybe 4 to 6 weeks, it's really just been practicing what I teach other people about personal growth and resistance and identity and beliefs that you have and paradigms that you work in that do not serve and support where you're going. Well, I have that stuff too, and I better walk my talk. So that's really what I've been spending my time doing.
Yeah. Wow. And I feel like it's funny. It's so easy for us to, as experts, to support our clients with what they're going through and all of that. And then when it's happening to us, we're like, no, I can make this work. I can figure it out. And a lot of times it's almost in like direct opposition to what we would actually advise one of our paying clients to actually do differently.
It's so true. And because integrity is like a top 3 value for me personally, but also in my business, I became acutely aware very quickly that was out of integrity for me to do. So I knew that, yes, it's making me profoundly uncomfortable. And I'm, part of me is acting like a 3-year-old pitching a fit about this. And integrity to me is more important than that. So I'm going to make the decision, and then I will, with great support, figure out what comes next.
Yeah. So I would love to hear a little bit about, as far as once you've made that decision. I know everybody's business is different as far as what logistically has to happen. Is it, oh, it's really just a matter of deciding you're not going to do work and then actually just following through on that? Is there team that has to be furloughed, I guess maybe we would call that? Or like, where does the actual rubber hit the road for you when it's like, because I can imagine part of it's that you don't want to give up what you love for even a month, let alone a longer period of time. But also maybe there's a lot of moving pieces in the business, expenses, team members, things that you're paying for, software. Like there's so many things that when you're at the level of business that you're at, that you can't just shut things off, right? So what was that process like? And maybe you're still in it. So, if it's a work in progress, obviously let us know. But what went through your mind as far as, okay, now that I've made this decision, what do I need to do to actually execute this? Because I will say, I think one of the reasons why a lot of people don't take breaks when they should be taking breaks is because they haven't done any work to actually create that opening in the business itself. It's one of the reasons why a lot of people I work with were answering emails in bed at the hospital after giving birth. And that was always something I was like, I am taking at least 30 days of nothing, and then ideally at least 8 weeks. And, I did go back to work a little sooner than I might have liked to this past maternity leave, but it wasn't like, oh my gosh, I'm in the hospital, like bleeding on the bed and like answering a client Voxer or something. Right. So
yeah, you're not typing out an email with one hand and pushing the like nurse button in your other hand. Yeah.
So walk us through like big picture. What did you have to do to actually start executing on this decision once it was made?
Sure. And I just want to preface by saying, I think this is and should be different for any person that decides to do it. A sabbatical can mean different things for different people based on your needs, right? So one of our shared colleagues reached out to say, I'm so glad you're doing this. I did it, and we traveled Europe for 3 months. And I'm like, yeah, that's not the sabbatical I'm taking. That's not the one. I love that you got to do that, but that's not what I'm taking. So I think the first step was really defining what it meant for me. And that was driven by what's the purpose of this. And there were multiple things. Number one, being able to physically rest more. And I was informed by my PT that what I was doing for rest was not actually what they considered rest. So just putting your feet up, but continuing to read, listen to a podcast, blah, blah. She's like, that's not rest. That's just putting your feet up. And so, some physical things, also getting into PT, tracking more health data to make health decisions, and doing some real introspective work on myself about why I have driven myself to the point where a sabbatical is not only encouraged, but now it's required for me. It's required. And also some reimagining. I know a lot of people's businesses look different now. They operate different. People are still pivoting and, recreating. Some people are just closing things down and doing something else. For me, I'm very, very clear about what I love to do. I think it's the way I was building it that was problematic. So that's something I will take a look at. But the sabbatical is not to be strategic. It's to be reflective and to have, provide rest and rejuvenation. So when I knew that, my next question was, okay, what are the sort of practical, pragmatic things that need to be addressed? Number one, money. So I met with my accountant and I met with my bookkeeper, told both of them, and my husband, told both of them, the decision that I had made with the support of my husband, friends, whatever. They were both very pleased that I had made that decision. And we came up with a financial plan to make sure that my tax account was still being funded, that basically the ducks were in a row financially. I let go of my team. While they were sad, they are the kind of people who said, but I am so glad you're doing this. Those are the kinds of people I hire. They're just incredibly wonderful human beings. And we did a sort of just a reverse engineered plan from their last day, so that everything it was taken care of. I made the decision to continue to provide the services that were already paid for. And the reason I did that is because a lot of my work, a lot of the results in my work, it's built on consistency and traction. And so I felt, honestly, from a place of integrity, it was profoundly unfair for me to just hit the brakes on these people that have been doing really deep personal identity work and just say, I'll see you in September. That just didn't feel right to me. And because the service delivery part of my business does not feel like work at all, that did not bother me. But where I did decide to pump the brakes is everything else. This is the last podcast interview I'm doing. I usually do several a month. I'm doing zero marketing, no email sequences, no launches, no, new offers, no sales calls, absolutely nothing other than things that were already paid for. No, like, hey, can I talk to you about maybe a fall JV? Nope. I'll talk to you in September. So I did I made all of those decisions. Then there was the period of informing. So inform people on Instagram, which is mostly where I hang out, my list, my clients, my business coach, all of that. Really, those things, I have to be honest, those things were the easiest part. The hardest part was answering the question, if I don't work, what do I do? And that's hard for me to admit to you, but that is a very difficult question for me because in the 5 years that I've been sick, all I've been able to do is work and then be with my family and occasionally be with my friends. I really haven't been able to live life fully. So take work out of it, which is where my mind is most of the day. That halted me in my tracks. So the next thing was coming up with boundaries around, okay, so what am I going to do? No, I'm not going to be on ChatGPT all day coming up with, ideas and fleshing them out. No, I'm not going to be creating 17 Word docs, like my next bunch of offers. And I'm not doing any of that.
I thought you were going to say, I'm not going to just watch Netflix all day.
Oh no, I'm going to be watching lots of my default is just go back to work because I love it. I love it. But this is what got me here. And to be quite honest, the admission of, and the way I was building it was not working. It works great for my clients. They get awesome results. I was not getting awesome results. And that is a business that's, out of whack. That's not the point. So being willing to just verbalize, not just have it in my head, but for accountability's sake, say to my closest friends, my business coach and my husband, these are the things I commit to shelving for 90 days and then sticking to it.
Yeah.
Does that fully answered the question?
Well, I was just thinking about 90 days. It's like, it sounds like a lot, but honestly, 90 days goes fast. We're already in mid-May. I'm like, how did that happen? I have a 3-month-old baby. So 90 days is like, I was giving birth probably about 90 days. So, and I don't know if this is something that you can answer, but I'm always curious about, obviously the long COVID thing, that's not something that was in your control and you could have done everything perfectly on your end and it might still have led to the need for a sabbatical, right? So I'm just wondering, for those people who don't necessarily have such a dramatic incident that would kind of kick things off, it might just be that slow burn of doing too much, over committing, running too many businesses. I've seen that happen before. I had an experience last year where the business, the way I had built it, was relying so much on me and my energy and my, I'm going to create all this stuff for anything my clients need. I'm just going to make it for them. And the thing that really basically crushed that for me was getting pregnant. So being pregnant, being exhausted, nauseous, mood, not the best. I decided to shut down an entire multi-six-figure group program that I was running. And I like, kind of like you, I finished out for who had paid. I didn't like
Yeah.
kick them out or refund or anything, but I didn't sign up new people. I stopped offering it. I stopped creating new curriculum for it. And I just kind of like let it kind of run its course until the last person's contract had wound up finishing. And then I was like, all right, we're going to just go into the maternity leave, have this baby, see what having a baby and a toddler is like. And then after that, I'm going to figure out, okay, what do I want my business to look like? And I'm actually really glad that that transpired the way that it did, because I, looking back, I know for a fact I was creating a model that wasn't going to work for a baby and a toddler. Like it was like I was hanging on by a thread last year, and that would have crushed me this year. So I'm glad that I made the decision to change the business model before it got bad. And now I'm in kind of that reinvention, like, okay, what do I want moving forward mode? So for you, is there anything that you feel like, not to say that you regret or that, you wish you had done differently, but maybe there's some things that if somebody's kind of heading in that direction, if they don't want to have to take a sabbatical, because like for me, I'm the breadwinner of our family. If I don't make money for 6 months, we're in a bit of trouble. So I would much rather avoid needing that. And that's why I did what I did last year. I'd rather avoid needing to shut things down entirely, even if that means I take a big revenue hit, versus working myself into a situation where now I'm out for 6 months and now we're like scrambling to figure out, if my husband can get a job or something. Right. So for the people who would rather not end up in that situation, they'd like their sabbatical to be a Europe trip as opposed to like a physical health recovery.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you think maybe I would have done this differently? Or is it like, no, I did everything that I should have done, and this is just the health experience I'm having just was never going to be something that I could avoid?
This is such a good question, because I think most people, at least I hope most people listening, cannot relate to my experience. I don't want people to be able to relate to that. It's unfortunate. But so no, I did not do everything. And this was just it was unfortunate, but I think I was headed for problems anyway. And really, it's not about what I was doing. It's about who I was being that was the problem. So the way I see potential explosions for a lot of women is the convergence of building businesses in systems that were never, ever built for women to succeed, number one. And then us generally being very ambitious, very high achieving. A lot of us are type A. Some of us are in recovery from type A.
But a lot A minus.
Yeah. A lot of us are type A. I think that personality comes with an identity that is very, very difficult to shift, because being a go-getter in our society is rewarded. It's really praised, although women get a lot of ambivalent feedback about it, more so in some industries than others. But this, can you be a good mother and a good wife or partner and, create a successful business and all of that, that's enough to deal with. But when you're just dealing with yourself, I know for me, a big problem is I can handle anything. And I truly believe that I can. But the problem was hyper independence. I've got this. I will handle it. I'll do it myself. And that's really, really problematic. And it's not that I didn't ask for help. It was that I didn't listen to that wiser, sort of deeper part of me that knew better, and then consult with that part of me. I was too dialed into my identity of being successful and driven. And so I sort of over-identified with that. And then I stopped listening to the other parts of me that are so much smarter than my intellect. So that converging with a lot of, for lack of a better word, and I don't mean this to trigger people, but a lot of patriarchal BS that has been taught to women about how you have to build a business and how you have to be a CEO a certain way and you have to all this stuff. Well, no, that was built for men. That was built for men with wives, by the way, right? That was not built for us. And so trying to build something successful under that umbrella or trying to kind of I love breaking systems. I love breaking paradigms. It is fun for me. I know it upsets people. I do not care. I love it. But it's a lot of work because when you break a system, then you have to create one that also works for you. Well, doing all of that under the umbrella of I'm ambitious, I can't be stopped and blah, blah, blah. It just, it wasn't a good combination. I think had I shown up differently for myself, I think things could have been better and could have been different. Who knows? In the end, the long COVID could have won anyway. I don't know. But I think that my business at least would have been in a better position, even if my health hadn't gotten a ton better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I resonate with so much of that. I'm like kind of chuckling a little bit because the whole purpose of this podcast is to explore how do you be the CEO of your own business, and also I'm sure there will be men that listen to this show, but pretty much most of my audience is women. And even when you said before, like, oh, how do I be a good mother and a good wife and a good business owner? I'm like, how many men do you think say, how can I be a good father and a good husband and a good business owner? Like, how can I do it all? And it's so funny because it's like, it sounds so cliche to say that, but it's really true. And, as somebody who is in, as I've been told, the thick of it, as far as motherhood is concerned, that is something where it's one of the things that actually keeps me going when stuff has been challenging, like having to shut down that program, having to take a pretty massive revenue hit from that decision last year, being willing to go into a maternity leave, being like, I don't know if we're going to make sales. I don't know if like what the business is going to look like at the other side of this. Just being able to handle all of that on top of literally creating and birthing and then feeding a human from my own body, and then being like sleep deprived and having a toddler who's now going through all the emotional things that toddlers go through. And so it's one of those situations where, I don't think I'm like massively self-aware. I think I'm just extremely defensive of my own physical well-being, for better or worse. And it's something where I feel like I made some decisions in my business in the last year that, from like a success on paper perspective, were not successful. But I do feel like, okay, but I survived what probably could have been a situation where I wouldn't have, necessarily been able to come back to work for a while. So that is something where I want to have these conversations more. And I love that you're talking about it as someone who's now kind of dealing with some of the consequences of maybe too much ambition or too much unrestricted ambition.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's because I love to be around other ambitious women. It's such good energy. And I don't mean in sort of like the alpha competitive, I'm going to do better than you, not that kind of ambition, just like you're so passionate about what you do and how it impacts other people and what you're trying to do for your family. And just, I love to be around women like that. And I'm like, you go, girl. I think it's really about the guardrails. And I had sort of just this unbridled go energy, and my body could not support that energy the way that it used to. Well, yeah, I used to go to the gym and squat a stupid amount of weight and like manage my energy differently, Now I can't walk around the block without having to lay down, It's very, very different. So it's about having guardrails, whether you're completely healthy and it doesn't matter where you are in your journey. It doesn't matter how old you are. None of that matters. But just the guardrails and the boundaries that are set there, not to squish you or to restrict you or dial back your, amazingness, but to allow you longevity with that. And one of the things about people like us that's great and also makes us kick our own butts is we are so adaptable. We adapt without even realizing we're adapting, so we make things look easy. Oh, you just had a baby, you went back to work, and you have another baby, and you have a house to take care of. Oh, you have pets, and you have aging parents, and you also have a chronic illness, and blah, blah, blah. It's just, I think too many of us have also normalized that to a degree that's not healthy. Again, it's a great skill characteristic to be adaptable. And it's really important, especially in this time in history, that we are pretty adaptable because things are so stressful and they're changing so rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I think we also have to be able to zoom out and say, maybe I've made this look entirely too easy to my partner, my friends, my even team, when you're not being totally honest with your team, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you end up just undermining yourself is the best way to put it, I
Mm-hmm.
think. So it's great to be adaptable. And again, that needs guardrails too.
Yeah. Well, and I bet I wouldn't be surprised if you're kind of like me, where if something is not going well, you're like, well, I'm not going to tell anybody because I don't want to bother anybody else or stress anybody else out. So let me just figure it out. And maybe they'll just never even know that there was a problem because I just took care of it before anyone else found out.
Yeah. I mean, I think I come at it slightly differently in that when there's a problem, I mean, I intentionally invest, in being in masterminds and things so that I have people around me who get the problem
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not bothering them. Like I'm bringing it up in a strategic way. Everybody learns from it, that kind of thing. But I don't bring it to sort of my OG friends because most of them are teachers. None of my friends from the last 30 years own a business. They wouldn't understand anything I was saying. They always support me without question,
Mm-hmm.
but I think my problem is that I'm a very strong person. I project strength. And so what I've done is I've trained and taught people to treat me as if I am strong all the time.
Mm.
And that becomes a problem because then they think, oh, she's fine. She's always got it together. She's the one everybody goes to when you have a problem.
Yeah.
So I never look like I have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the thing I hear all the time from people, which is both a compliment and makes me want to yank what's left of my hair out, is you don't look sick at all. You look great. And I'm like the people close to me, I know what they mean by it, but somebody out in the community I bumped into yesterday and he's like, yeah, you look great. You don't look sick at all. And I'm thinking, so what are you trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sick. I'm very sick. And yes, it's not the kind of sick that maybe someone with going through chemo looks like, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot of pressure. And I think people make assumptions very, very easily. So my thing wasn't bothering other people. My thing was being willing to ask for help in a way that shatters what they believe to be true about me,
Mm-hmm.
which is not that I'm strong, but that I'm strong all the time without any wavering.
Yeah.
And that's just simply not true.
Yeah. And it's funny because I'm sure you don't want people to say, wow, you look terrible like that. But nobody wants to hear that. And I would imagine that having that, oh, you don't look sick, almost, it makes it feel like, oh, you're fine.
Yeah, that's it.
You don't need help.
It's different when somebody says, hey, you look great. When somebody says you don't look sick, I try not to make assumptions, but that little voice in my head is like, they think you're faking this for I don't know what. You don't get any positive attention when you say you have long COVID. Half people think you're lying and tell you that it doesn't exist.
Oh,
and then everybody else is like, oh my God, I feel so sorry for you. And I'm like, well, neither of these things feel great, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not getting any positive, anything from saying that I'm sick.
Mm-hmm.
But, when people have that sort of question about you, it's uncomfortable, but then I always kind of come to the conclusion, that's your problem, not mine. It's just an uncomfortable thing. And I think you're right. They don't mean it that way, but it's just a reminder to me that people are going to make assumptions about me based on what I look like.
Mm-hmm.
And those assumptions right now in this, season of my life will likely be really inaccurate.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I feel like that's kind of a good metaphor for online business in general, right? I mean, there's so many people just make so many assumptions about any of our situations. And part of that is because I do think we tend to curate. I mean, I'm not on there just like spilling my guts on
Mm.
Instagram all the time saying, oh, I had a bad day today or something like that. So usually people are only seeing the strong, capable, got it together kind of person. And not to say that we should be using Instagram for our personal therapist or something, but I do think conversations like this can be really helpful because it normalizes this experience. And I think a lot of women who are the type of people who consider themselves capable, strong, able to handle it, like got it together, which I would categorize myself generally like that. Maybe not
Mhm.
after having babies, but like usually that's how I show up. It is something where if you start to struggle, you just assume, well, this is just me and I'm just the one that
Mm.
can't hang with, what's going on. And I feel like, especially in the online business space, I've had thoughts of like, these competitors they don't have kids. They don't have anything else going on. Of course, they have all the time in the world to grow their business. Of course, they are up at 5 a.m. doing their, ice bath and blah, blah, blah to like get
Mm.
their brains perfectly ready for the day so that they can have the most abundant, magical business day possible. And so, I'll see that kind of stuff and I'm like, okay, well, that's not my life right now. And
Right.
I just have to accept my circumstances. And it's not even accepting them because I also am like, I chose them.
Mhm.
I want to be a mom. I love my babies. Like
Mhm.
this is not something that I'm just tolerating, but it can be really easy as somebody who is ambitious and high achieving to have that sense of like, oh man, people are getting way ahead of me because they have the ideal, well, at least I think they have the ideal circumstances. And I don't know, there's just this feeling of like, will I ever catch up? Will I ever
Yeah.
like, is this like as good as it's gonna get? Because I can't keep up with these other people that are, running 10 times faster than me.
Yeah.
I imagine you maybe have had similar types of experiences when you've had your sickness getting in the way of doing what you want.
Yeah, it wasn't as so much about what other people were doing because I have to say, having coached a lot of people who online are very well known and they're well known as being very financially successful and having their lives optimized and all of this stuff. I'm one of the ones that have been behind the curtain with them, and I'm
Mm.
like, all right, we listen, like you have some really great things going on, but this picture that has been painted,
Yeah.
whether intentionally or subconsciously, is not a great, it's a snapshot, right?
Mhm.
So my tendency is not to compare with other people.
Mhm.
My tendency is to get upset with myself for where I think I should
Mm.
be.
Yeah.
So it's this, and it's problematic because in one way, it really pushes me to achieve things. And in another way, I have to be very, very mindful of that internal self talk because
Mhm.
it can be really nasty, like it
Yeah.
can for all of us. And that's just not helpful. The only
Mhm.
helpful comparison is I am today and who was I a year ago. And it's not even great with the business, right? And in these times, because from 2020 to now, things are just a complete, you know, hopefully you can believe it's been a complete shit show. Like, let's be honest, it's been insane. And some businesses and some industries will thrive and be better than they've ever been. And I mean, I'm working with somebody now who she's never made less. Over her career, she's made over $30 million. And in the last 2 years, she has not been able, 3 years, she hasn't been able to break seven figures, not once. Right. So I think we have to extend ourselves some situational grace as well.
Mhm.
And just be able to say, okay, what did I learn? And onward,
Mhm.
onward. And for me, just bringing it back to the sabbatical, onward cannot be, okay, I took a break and now I'm going back to who I was being and what I was doing before,
Yeah.
because a year from now, I'm going to need another sabbatical, if not worse. So
Mhm.
it's really about taking this intentional pause to kind of come back to myself and what I know to be true and what I really deeply desire. And how can I do this given these life circumstances that I've been handed.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to have to be creative, and I'm going to have to be innovative, and I'm going to have to be really brave and take a lot of risks. But what I'm not willing to do is live in an either or. Like, either I am healthy and don't work, or I work and continue to get sicker. Like, that's that sort of binary choice. I just can't with that.
Yeah.
So there has to be the both and. And
Yeah.
I think I have to slow down to discover that.
Yeah, definitely. So that's actually a perfect segue to where I want to wrap the conversation. I'm sure I could talk to you for a lot more time, and we'll have to have you back in the future to tell us how amazing everything is.
Yeah,
after
I would love that. I can do a little retrospective on
where is she now?
Yeah.
But to that point, I would just love to hear if there's anything that you're looking forward to with either the sabbatical itself or just what you're hoping to create after the sabbatical's done and you are getting back into work and you are creating from a place of protecting yourself and your energy and your well-being and also growing your business.
Yeah. And actually, this is perfect timing, as a lot of things are, in that I was really reflecting on that this morning and yesterday. And when I first made the decision, I was trying to think about that, and I was coming up with nothing. I think probably because I was just, having that internal fight with the part of me that's a toddler.
Little pity party.
Oh my gosh, I was just pitching a fit. But what came to me was, oh, right. So women have been fed this, if you can be successful in life and in business, but you have to do it this way. Meaning you have to be willing to put yourself last. You have to be willing to make an insane amount of sacrifices, an unreasonable amount of sacrifices. And I thought to myself, I don't have a lot of examples of women taking that a third path. And when I don't see something I need, I typically create it. So I was thinking to myself, oh, that could be really exciting if I come out of this sabbatical with some semblance of an idea of how to break that system and that paradigm and come up with the third way and then share it with other people so that they can go, I'm not doing it this way anymore either.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And that I'll be excited to hear what you come up with, because that's kind of the same kind of question I've been asking myself for different reasons, obviously, but being in this phase of my life where, my energy is not anywhere near what it normally would be. And I don't have any control over, like, I could do all the best things for my health and still my baby might be waking up in the middle of the night, or I might still, have a toddler that's going through a developmental shift and needs a lot more attention. Right. So it's being able to accept the circumstances as, it's not necessarily the optimal circumstances for, crushing all your business goals and, being out there and being like famous on the internet or whatever. But I'm excited to figure out, okay, well, what can it look like to do both in a way that I feel good about and not feel like what I feel like a lot of women are choosing between either successful business or fill in the blank, right? So for you, it's either successful business or your health. Right. For me, it might be that and me, like my successful business or being a present mother, that kind of stuff. And even to the point of like successful business or like time with my husband, things like that. So it is something where I feel that there is a third path, a plan C or whatever we want to call it. But you're right in terms of it not being something that's modeled very frequently. And even if it is modeled, I have personally seen, and this is just me, so if I'm wrong, please tell me, and people can DM me on Instagram to tell me or show me who this example is that I'm missing. But I feel like even a lot of the women that present themselves as this, image of I do balance it and I do have the harmony between things. When you look behind the scenes at their business, they have people that are doing most of the doing for them, which is not, I'm not saying that to be denigrating. I think that's really cool, but building a team like that takes a lot of effort. It takes money. It takes there's a lot that goes into that. And sometimes even
Yes.
building and leading a team might not be something you have capacity for, right? So, and this is where I'm like, okay, there's got to be an option where either you're solopreneur or like super lean team, maybe like a few contractors, no more than one full-time employee necessarily, but you're also making good money and you're not working your face off.
Yeah.
And so figuring out what that looks like and figuring out, especially with, all the AI stuff coming into play, like, all this stuff that's totally changing the industry anyway, I think it's a good time for us to be like, okay, well, if everything's going to be different now because of technology and, the world changing so rapidly, isn't this a good opportunity for me to decide how I want this to go instead of just kind of like being dragged along, like, you're getting dragged behind a pickup truck or something that's just taking you into the future or something.
Yeah,
So
I agree. I think that's an awesome point. And I think for women, one of the questions that we have to start that journey and that, figuring it out with is, what is my actual definition of success?
mhm.
Because I think too many women have been taught to define success based in a very prescriptive kind of way. I've in like last year or two, I've been seeing a lot of this. Eight is the new seven figures. And I'm like, can we shut that down, please? That is just stop. And I don't begrudge you making 8 figures, knock yourself out. But no, we're not normalizing that 8 is the new seven. No, we're not doing that. So I think if we can start to be honest about rejecting what just does not resonate with us, and that does not mean that our success is minimized in any way, I think that's important. And I'm not saying don't go for the big numbers. If that's the thing for you and it's calling to you, go for it. But that doesn't mean it's for everybody. Mm-hmm. And so I think we have to just start being really honest about what we've been fed and start to question, is that really actually a great match for me and what I want and what I need and what feels good? Mm-hmm. And that's a hard conversation to have with yourself. But I think also having it in community with each other is what brings down any of the shame and anxiety you might have, saying, you know what, if I make $250,000 a year, I'm golden. Like, this is fantastic. Mm-hmm. And there's no shame in that because you're not at 7 figures or multiple 7 figures. So I think that's a really good place to start.
Yeah. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for coming on. And I want to be respectful of your energy and everything that you're bringing to this conversation, since I know, you have so much wisdom and experience, and not only the psychology background, but also now the personal experience to pull from. So, and also I'm very honored that this is the last interview you're doing. I'm like, yeah, I would have snagged her before she disappeared into the reinvention abyss that you're about to go into. So for people who want to find out what's going on when you come back, where can they find you in September? I think you said was when you are planning.
I'll be back Monday, September 2nd. So actually I pulled my entire website. That's going to get rebuilt. So the best place to connect with me is on Instagram. Even when I had a full team, I'm the only one in the DMs and messages. I don't have people acting like they're me. And that's mostly because a lot of what I do is, requires discretion and privacy. So if you want to hop in there and send a message or even say, hey, I'd love to connect with you in September, that's fantastic. And I'll make sure that happens. Or if you just have some feedback about this conversation, I would love to hear it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. We'll make sure that your Instagram link is in the show notes. And I hope that even with your sabbatical, I'll see you at we're in a entrepreneur group together that's local. And whenever Kelly's able to come to the dinners, it's always so fun to have you there. So hopefully I'll see you at a dinner or two before you're back on track.
For sure. Especially if I'm feeling better and more energized. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I look forward to it. Thank you for having me today. This was a really great conversation for me to have right before I step out of things. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you and you being so willing to share. Behind the curtain, I feel like this kind of conversation is not one that you hear a lot. So I know our listeners really appreciate it. And thanks to all of you for hanging out with us. We'll see you here next time on the Nourished CEO Podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Nourished CEO Podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation and it brought you value, I would be so grateful if you would take a minute to leave a review over on iTunes. Your feedback not only helps more amazing coaches and practitioners like you find the show, it also helps me keep creating the kind of content that you want more of. Just head over to Apple Podcasts, search for the Nourished CEO Podcast, scroll down and tap that write a review button. It only takes a minute and it means the world to me. Thanks again for being here, and I'll catch you on the next episode.